Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello, everyone. Sorry it's been 2 days since I last made spoiler review. I decided to take 2 days off because it seems like they decided to take a nice slow crawl to finish up the spoilers of Wild of Eldraine. I think they released like 2 cards on Saturday and Sunday, so I wasn't in a rush. I didn't want to be selling my content a little short, be disappointing to all y'all, so now I have something to talk about, some meat and potatoes if you're new here. I've been covering everything from beginning to end, all the rares and the mythics, and all the enchanted tales, specialty enchantments that are being thrown into every pack. Let's get into it. I did shave my head. It's hot. I don't want to deal with having a lot of hair during the summer. Devouring Sugar Maw. It's a donut! A literal living donut. For a white and a colorless, you could play its adventure side at instant speed, make a 1/1 human, and a food token. That's cool. The back end is a 4-drop 6/6 with Menace and Trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sack an artifact, enchantment, or token. If you don't, you tap it. The stat block and the evasion and trample reminds me of a lot of Abyssal Demon, where you can't win and your opponents can't lose. There's been a lot of iterations of Abyssal Demon, and this reminds me a lot of that one. Although it doesn't have that ridiculous clause, it's just the evasion and stat block for the CMC is extremely similar. The adventure side kind of feeds into itself. I think if you build your decks where you make plenty of fodder, I don't see why you won't have it to pay into this big fat body. I think it's perfectly fine in 60 card formats, and it doesn't lend itself to anything particular that you want to be doing in Commander. The drawback about this kind of a card and the bargain mechanic in general is that you have to give up board pieces in order for them to function or get that bonus effect that you truly want in a card. In the philosophy of how I play Magic, I don't like it, but I don't know, it's up to you what you do and do not like. It's a 3/3 for 3 with haste, has celebration. You have to have 2 or more permanents enter the battlefield for this creature to become a 4/4 dragon with flying and fire breathing until end of turn. This just feels weird. That celebration effect isn't worth your time in Commander. Maybe this is like a 1 of or 2 of in Standard. I can see this getting a little bit of play just because that's a good finisher for a cheap amount of mana investment. You just have to somehow consistently make 2 non-land permanents enter the battlefield, which it seems like it's very possible. It also has haste, so you could potentially blow someone out pretty darn good if people aren't ready for it. And a Red Tooth Regent. 2 mana and activation. You choose a target enchantment. It doesn't have the same name as another permanent you control. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a legendary. Oh, except it isn't legendary. Okay. If a token is an aura, untap, scry 2, and activate only as a sorcery. That's kind of cool. If you specifically copy an aura enchantment, you could potentially do it again if you have enough mana to keep paying into this ability. Maybe it's worth more of your time to be copying legendary enchantments, but I don't know how many significant legendary enchantments exist in just Magic in general. So if you're chasing it in EDH, it seems like a tall order and very difficult, and the hoops aren't really gonna necessarily win you the game if you start jumping through them. So in Commander, I'm not a big fan of this. I think the bigger interest is that untap clause. If you target an aura, you could basically make something insanely huge. I imagine if you make a copy of All That Glitters, that's pretty brutal. And there's plenty of other auras that are extremely powerful and some I wouldn't want to particularly want to see someone copying a lot. You could do it with this individual. Pollen Shield Hair. For green sorcery speed adventure, you have target creature gain vigilance and +X/+X, whereas X is the number of creatures you control. I wish it was at instant speed because you might be able to blow someone out with it. And then for 2 mana, you get its creature side, which is token creatures you control get +1/+1. It's an anthem effect for a very specific permanent type. I feel like this card's only a rare because it has some density to it, but neither the adventure or the creature part are particularly impressive. He might have been able to get away with this being an uncommon. Tale of the Ages, enchanted creatures control get +2/+2, and that's a 2 mana investment, so that's a really good rate. You just need to get your creatures enchanted. In Commander, your life totals start out so incredibly high that I don't know if, +2 is truly worth your time. It's almost like if you're going to diverge from the formula of making something really big in a Voltron strategy, it better be good. And Tale for the Ages is not a good diverging path. I don't see a lot of people playing this in their aura decks at all. In a 60 card format like standard, I don't know if people are going to be pursuing this either. I don't need that 2 power from this random enchantment when I could get that 2 power from a much scarier aura. It takes 2 permanents for this card to be turned on, you know what I mean? Why introduce extra steps when you don't need them? Lots of new arts. Leyline of Abundance skin reprinted. I actually play this Leyline a lot because I like mana dork strategies. The one I currently play this in is Catilda, because Catilda turns all your humans into mana dorks that tap for a mana of their color. And basically when you tap a creature for mana, it adds an additional green. So effectively your creatures tap for 2 mana instead of just 1. And it also combos with itself because for 8 mana, you could funnel your mana dork mana. There's no tapping clause. You just need the mana to pay for it. So I've had games where I've paid this activation cost multiple times in a single turn. And if you're playing things like Seedborn, you go into each people's turns and you just turn your, mana dorks that aren't very threatening into...
It's very scary stuff.
I really like this card, personally. And again, like all the other ley lines, if you have it in your opening hand, you could take a pregame action, play for free. Season of Growth's getting another reprint. This is particularly good where you target your own stuff with auras, or I like to run this card in my mono green Legolas deck that I've been working on, where I just cast fight spells and I basically 2-for-1 people. Season of Growth is an A-lister in that deck, and it's a A-lister in a lot of decks that do the Voltron strategy thing. Highly recommend it if you haven't tried it. This is probably the coolest anime art of all the cards I've seen so far. And Karmic Justice is also really good. It basically forces people to trade permanents with you, and it 2-for-1s themselves. So if they blow something of yours, you get to blow up a permanent of that player's. Extremely brutal in Magic. You'll probably just scare them off and buy yourself a lot of protection without actually protecting your permanents, if you know what I mean. You're just like strong arming your opponents and being pretty subservient. If you're going to target anything of yours, you should start off with Karmic Justice so you could stem the bleeding off if you can. But yeah, I'm a fan of this card. Dark Tutelage. This is a worse version of Dark Confidant. It costs 1 mana more, but you get the evasion of it being an enchantment. You put a card in your hand, you lose life equal to its mana value. Pretty straightforward. I haven't run Dark Tutelage in a while. Maybe I'll play it in the future. I just feel like this is an older kind of enchantment that doesn't really see play anymore. Back in the day when it was just this and Necropotence and Dark Confidant, Phyrexian Arena, you just ran all 4. But now there's so many like upkeep draw triggers in Magic that they're also cheaper. I feel like the new standard for that is 2 mana, and that's why this is kind of fallen to the wayside. Leyline of Sanctity. Of all the Leylines, I think this is one of the more popular ones. The probably best ones is Leyline of the Void, which exiles your opponent's graveyards. This one gives you hexproof, and then the other one is the flash one, Utopia Sprawl. This is a really efficient costed mana ramp. You basically get your investment back the turn you play it, but it's one of my favorites because it enchants your forest, meaning it's not like a mana dork like a Elvish Mystic where they can die to a board wipe. This is far more resilient, and it's much more mana efficient than things like Arcane Signet and all the other rocks that cost 2 mana. Only things that really beat out Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth is things like the really expensive rocks like Lotus Petal, the Moxes. In terms of flexibility, tapping for mana of any color of your choosing, it's hard to come by, and it's one of the best in the business. If you don't have a copy, I highly recommend
Give it a try.
Pyroblast getting a reprint. This is a cool iteration. It's an anime Rowan, I think. This is the first full art iteration, which is really cool. Get a copy for, looks like $4. It's one of those cards where if I play it in Commander, I have a way to discard cards really consistently. What's a good example of that is I play Lord Windgrace competitively, and Lord Windgrace is awesome because his uptake ability lets you discard a card. If it's a land, you draw 2, but if it's anything else, it just replaces itself, and it lets me get away with playing cards like Pyroblast. If it's a dead card in my hand, I just simply replace it. No big deal. I run all kinds of stuff like that in Windgrace, I run things like compost, carpet of flowers, just stuff that's very specific at hosing, difficult to play against archetypes, and I get to take full advantage of it without sacrificing a card slot. What's not to love? I know this is a uncommon or common in Wilds of Eldraine. It's getting a full art version. Bargain is just another version of Kicker. I just wish Wizards was a little more creative, as I imagine most are. It's literally the same thing as Kicker, and they do this almost every other set, if not every new set that comes out, is they have some kind of version of Kicker and they just give it a different name. I think before this, the magic word was cleave. It's just Kicker. Quit giving us quote unquote new mechanics and then just changing the name of it when it's the same. I don't think anyone believes that they're well designed and the most creative things in the world either. So that was everything for today. Like I said, I wanted to take a day off because there was like 2 to 3 cards released on Saturday, Sunday, and then I think they ramped it up a little bit today, a little more meatier than my last video for sure. My pick of the day is definitely this Karmic Justice. Not only does it look really badass, but it's also very functional. Of the cards I talk about today, maybe the next closest thing is Utopia Sprawl in terms of functionality, and I look forward to tomorrow. I think Wilds of Eldraine is pretty much on its last leg here. I imagine it wraps up come this week, and I am looking forward to playing most of these commanders when they come out on September 8th. Want to do a lot of unique builds, particularly the 3 witches, the white-black one, the red-green one, and the blue-white one. I think they're extremely awesome. I'm also interested in the Dimir Fairy that kind of saved the plane from Phyrexian invasion and how this plane dealt with the problem. I'll give you the cliff notes. The Dimir Fairy, where you choose a number from 0 to 10, creates this concoction that puts everything to sleep, and also gave special weapons to those 3 witches that I mentioned earlier, and they were able to defeat the threat. Now there's basically like a payment due to that fairy from these witches. Hope you all had a good time. If you like the little bits of information of what's coming out, the lore, join us, lad. I'm all about that. Only more stuff to come. Take care.